I haven't seen the guy say, no, I'm not going to take your deal because you're a woman. If you got a good deal, they don't care if you're pink, purple, or blue. If they see a good deal, they want to be part of the deal. Now, where some of the sexism can come in is how they treat you do they treat you as a co-participant, and what's that mix? But you also can control that and say, wait a minute, if I'm going to be on this deal, this is the level of the deal that I want to be in, and you have to come into it with a level of confidence. So if you come into it with confidence, you don't get trampled on, because if you're bringing value and confidence, the rest of it kind of becomes a moot point.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Karen Oeser, who shares her financial journey and how she helps others with theirs. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. This week's quote is from Sun Tzu. A military force has no constant formation. Water has no constant shape. The ability to gain victory by changing and adapting according to the opponent is called genius. How much do you change and adapt? Are you rigid? Do you say this is the way we've always done it? Think about the first question I always ask about learning about money growing up. If you've not changed and adapted from that script from childhood, you may be stuck for life. It doesn't have to be that way. Speaking of taking action, last week's action step from Alan Weiss was to be aware of yourself. Take stock of your strengths and build on them. It's all about compounding with money and skills. We're going to chat about the money part today. The question is, are you compounding? And are you continuing to do it? I got to tell you, I'm amazed at what I've achieved. More than I can have imagined. But it's because I keep showing up. And I don't give up. Now I do pivot, and that's okay. By the way, thank you for listening. The reality is you can always get more money, but you can never get more time. And I appreciate you spending time with me. I hope the value I provide is allowing you to compound in your life. Once you know what you want, it becomes so much easier to acquire it because you know which way you're going and you can ignore all of the noise. Not only that, your mind starts looking for ways to accomplish that goal. It's like when you decide to buy a certain car, and all of a sudden, everywhere you go, you start seeing them. It means you're in tune with what you want, but you've got to get in tune. This week, we're going to chat with Karen to focus on money mindsets and breakthroughs so we can have harmony in life. You have to pick the right choices that you want. Karen is the principal of Eastlight Investments. It's a company that partners with passive investors to acquire value-add apartment buildings in the Southeast. Prior to launching that, she managed a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio for over 20 years. And she often speaks to groups at large seminars because she loves sharing her knowledge. Taking her passion for financial literacy to the marketplace, Karen recently launched Financial Literacy for Her, a program created to help women overcome their fear of money and empower them to live in financial freedom. She specifically designed FLH to be a safe place for women to be vulnerable and ask scary questions without judgment. As part of her program, each client is partnered with a knowledgeable coach to create a diversified wealth plan to help them realize their dreams. In addition, clients will be teamed up with other like-minded women to share their journeys. In her capacity as a pastor and a licensed minister of dance, Karen works with families who have loved ones struggling with drug addiction, mental illness, and incarceration. In her free time, she loves spending time with her teenage sons, being in the outdoors, traveling, and volunteering at her church. Let's meet Karen. Welcome to Richer Soul, Karen Oeser. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And I am excited for the conversation and to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
If they could teach you a negative amount, mine would fall into that category. I had zero financial training growing up. My dad was a CPA, but he was not a very good steward of money growing up. And it's interesting because with my Financial Literacy for Her program, I spend a lot of time on our mindset issues. And that's because I really, these money blocks that you have and, these messages that you hear growing up. And so my parents were constantly fighting about money. So a natural solution is to not ever want to talk about it or think about it, because my mom was ultra conservative and kind of a really good bookkeeper at first, but my dad did not manage money well. And, they did a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then I remember quite vividly as it was actually quite a terrible event. Actually, we were, I was on a track team, and my mom was taking a bunch of us to a track meet out of town, and she went to go get the gas tank filled, and the credit card was rejected. And that was obviously humiliating for me, humiliating for her. And she just kind of gave up at that point. And I was 13 at the time. So that really, unfortunately, gave me a real kind of negative relationship with money at an early age.
It's kind of surprising because you said your dad was a CPA, and yet you still struggled with money.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, like the cobbler's sons have no shoes, right? And that was very much the case, and I've even experienced a lot of that in myself. I carry kind of almost like living a double identity, like, because that's kind of the lesson it taught me, because he was actually a fabulous CPA. People loved, he was really well respected and did a great job, yet just could not manage it at all. And it was just a chronic fight in our home. And so that really taught me, I learned his ability to work with money, understand money, but yet kind of be conflicted about acting at home one way and another way in your profession. And unfortunately, I outright carried that behavior into my adulthood, which is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about financial literacy now.
And so you actually went into the investment business. You spent quite a long time there.
Yeah, 25 years.
And yet, even though you're in the investment business, you still had the same issue, I guess your dad did. You still struggled financially?
Yeah. And, and it was, I went from, because my ex-husband was going through medical school and everything. So, we were we spent a lot of time putting each other through school. We met in undergrad, and then we took kind of, and our parents didn't help us with our education. So we put ourselves through school. And so we went from a time of, not being able to really rub two pennies together, studying in front of a stove, graduating. And then I got a good job and I started making a fair amount of money. And then it was like, I make enough money where I don't need to necessarily be a good steward with my money, in my mind. So it was like, I went from poor to wealthy very quickly, but I never got into actually managing those assets in a very intentional way. And, I'm finding that, and that's what I'm finding, that kind of personality is more common than most people would think, because that's actually one of the specialties of what we do with my financial coaching program is wealthy women who have money but don't know how to manage it or work with it or have a healthy attitude about it. They just happen to have a profession that lets them get away with not necessarily being a good steward.
And I think it's true. It doesn't matter how much you make. It matters how much you keep at the end of the day.
Right. Absolutely. And not only how much you keep, and then what you keep and how you let it grow and where you put it and how you spend it. And does your lifestyle match your, or do you, and does it even match your values? And that means having an honest talk with your money.
So how did you overcome your struggles?
It was really starting to do mindset issues and think about mindset issues. And it came to me as my sons got older. And I thought, is this really the torch I want to pass on to them? Because their father also didn't come from, didn't have any financial literacy. Their parent, he grew up on a farm. His parents did okay, but they had 5 kids and had nothing left over, but they didn't take the time to teach their kids about finances. And so you had 2 parents coming together who didn't talk about their finances, even though they had good professions. And so I thought, I really need to teach my children, because I don't want to carry this on. I want to teach them how to manage money. And it's not even manage money, right? It's a relationship with money and your attitude towards money. And, I was also, to add fuel to this fire, is I was brought up in a religious tradition, which is very common, unfortunately, that money is an evil thing. And, it's money is the root of all evil, and nobody bothers to say it's only when it becomes your God is when it's evil. But most people so many people don't get that. And since they have a poor relationship with money, they fix on, I'm just a Christian or whatever, and money's a bad thing. It's like, no, actually it's not. And if you talk about the Bible, it talks a lot about money, but it also talks about stewarding it well, and also what you do with it, and also one of the things that really, when I went back into, because I'm also a pastor, so I spent a lot of time reading the Bible, and it's amazing how, one, talking about how we treat the poor, and also talking about what we do with the greatness that we've been given, and being charitable with your money, and thinking about others, and thinking how, it's used to bless yourself and others, and to treat it with a level of respect.
And that is very true. I know that there are a lot of incorrect religious beliefs around money, and I don't know where they come from, because as you said, the Bible has quite a bit about money in it. And there's one story in particular where they talk about the giving of talents, and one is given 1, and one is given 5, and one is given 10. And the person who has the least and does nothing with it is punished by having it taken away and given to the one who has the most.
We don't talk about that story. It's amazing.
And it comes down to the love of money is the root of all evil, not the money itself. It's the relationship with it. So what have you done differently for your kids now?
Well, obviously, I taught them basic budgeting. I've also, one of the things we don't talk a lot about is as a society is we don't really talk about our goals and what we want to do with that money. And that's also that you become a much more active participant if you understand how that money's working for you or not working for you, and I've taught them about investments, and obviously tithing is a big deal. And, even if you choose not to tithe, I think it's a very good practice to give a certain percent to others, to a cause outside of you. And so those are some of the things that I've really taught them to understand, and also to read about it and just be aware of what's going on around them. And is this something that really is this something that you need? Is it a want? Because that's another thing that, particularly in our society today, in this whole Insta world we live in, is no distinguishing the difference between a need and a want. And thinking about, and the cause of effect and effect of money, is like, if I spend here, I take away from there. And thinking about that and actively thinking about that relationship.
And people don't have that. I think that is one of the reasons people struggle so much. They look at a decision and they say, spend money, don't spend money, be unhappy. They don't think spend money, take away from other opportunities that I might enjoy better than this current spending that I just got hyped into purchasing or excited about that doesn't fit with my values because you didn't take the time to figure out what your values are to begin with.
And then what happens next? You get stuck in the guilt shame cycle. And that creates more negative feeling, that creates a negative relationship with money, because we have this impulsive buy, then you beat yourself up later, and then you don't want to face it. And then you can just really get into that cycle. And, I'm seeing that all over the place. I saw it on my own personal level, but, I'm seeing it through clients, and I'm seeing it through just our general society, act first and think later. And unfortunately, it usually expresses itself in our bank accounts often.
That it does. So you spent a lot of time in the investment world. What do you think of the advice that most people are given?
They run the spectrum, because I'm the diversification. I call myself the diversification queen, because a lot of advisors talk their book and don't consider the full picture. Also, and again, this is part of, talking my own book, my financial literacy coaching program. But one of the things is not thinking about, so many of the advisors are thinking a silo. So it's like your investments only, but not looking at the broader picture of, you've got insurance involved, you got attorneys involved, you got your trusts involved, looking at your entire financial picture. And you need to know what the right hand needs to know what the left hand's doing. And often they don't speak to each other. And so that's where, looking at your whole financial picture can be a walking contradiction if it's not managed as something holistic. And that's one of my broader issues with it is it just feeds into everybody living their life in a silo in whatever category it is, and just not, because when you're thinking, am I walking in alignment with what I'm supposed to do? It's like, well, is everything in my life, does it all come together? Is it, part of my story? Is it connected? And if your accountant and your insurance advisor and your financial advisor, they're all telling you three different things. You just kind of go to one place and act and behave, but eventually, and a lot of times, especially when you don't have a lot of money, it doesn't matter as much because the stakes aren't as high. But then as it grows, and it's like you can go three different directions, and then you try to unwind it. And that's often what would happen when I was at the financial firm, is you'd had people that were 55, especially when I started, people retired closer to that, not as much now, but they're coming 50, 55, 60-ish, and they're at the end of their careers. and they come in. It's like, okay, what do I do? And you start asking them about their planning, what they've done. And you have to look at them and say, one, you don't have enough money. Two, you're going to have to make some big choices. And who's your team? And you get a blank stare. And, that once again informed a lot of my choice behind my financial literacy company, because the earlier you get them, the better off, because you can start thinking about these things earlier and be cognizant of even may not be in a position when you're younger to have a proper trust put together, but to be cognizant of that's something that if you don't, you need to be thinking of it as you grow in your career.
And that's true. And part of the issue is money compounds. And if you haven't set it on the right path, it's not going to compound in the right direction. And so that creates considerable issues. So let's dig into more. You mentioned you're a pastor, and that also kind of crosses into the financial space. I'd love to hear how you juggle that all.
Yeah, it goes with the being in alignment with what you're called to be. My perspective is, we are all these unique masterpieces who are here for a certain purpose, a certain calling, and trying to think about is your life lining up with that? And it's also not all about I'm called to be rich and do this and do that. It's like, yeah, you might, wealth certainly is part of that picture, but what lights your fire? What brings you to life? Because what brings you to life often has to do with your purpose, and it can kind of help you guide you to where you want to go. And when you're doing when you're in a place where you're moving where you feel you're called to be, it's amazing that's when money's, that's when things start coming your direction. And just bringing it down to a personal level for me, for example, is one of the things I've always wanted to do is to be a writer. I've always been attracted to writing, but I kept pushing it off and think about it. But last year, I really started to think about it with intention and started looking for opportunities. And, I have a book coming out in, actually in 2 weeks on April 30th. It's called Aspire Women Finding Their Purpose. And all of a sudden, other book opportunities are starting to come my way because I'm starting to walk in that lane. And then, and it starts out with free books, and then you get paid books, and you start moving up. And so you start moving in that direction. So I like to spend a lot of time with people and saying, looking at your life, what served you well and what hasn't served you well. I'm sure, you're familiar with the stat of 80% of money issues is mindset. The other 20% is just putting it into motion. And so spending a lot of time saying what in your life is working well and what isn't, because what we do with our money is often an expression of that, because like in my home, we didn't talk about money. Well, if you dig a little deeper, that means, well, if you don't talk about money, you probably don't talk about other things. And then you start unwinding it. And so that's one of the areas that really crosses over, so I have a partner in my business, and she works primarily on the content side of it. And I work more on the mindset of it and really bringing in, it's not a faith-based financial program, but, I definitely don't, I can't help but bring it in to my practice. And that's, it's no secret. And I really find that once we start digging into that, that's where people start looking for, they start opening themselves up to more possibilities and the openness where, okay, now that we're looking at your finances, we're looking at what's working well, and and it comes down to behaviors, right? You're looking what kind of behaviors work well, because it's about behavior modification and creating new habits. So you need to know what habits aren't working before you can start developing new habits.
And that is so true. And all of these things are connected. I've always said, show me their calendar and show me their credit card statement, and I'll tell you all about a person.
Yes.
Because this is how we behave, right? And we behave, and most people behave in a pretty systematic way. And you can just look at them and see. Too often, though, we're blind to how others view us or how we're actually behaving. We think we're doing one thing, but the calendar and the credit card tell the truth.
Yeah, and it takes an act of courage to say, okay, I'm ready to look under the hood.
Speaking of looking under the hood, you've spent a lot of time on self-development, and listeners know I love Tony Robbins and some of the other programs. What's been your experience with Tony?
Yeah, my experience, I had a phenomenal experience with Tony. And Tony's program came into my life when I said, okay, I'm ready to be brave. And it's actually a really funny story. Probably some of your listeners, this may sound familiar. So the way Tony came into my life was about 2.5 years ago is when I started to get interested into real estate. I had done really, really well in real estate when I was younger, earlier in my career. Before the crash of 2008, I had some successful flips, and so I had a taste of it. But then I saw so many people's lives get destroyed after the 2008 crash. And I kind of said, okay, I want nothing to do with real estate. So I said, I'm done with it. So enter about 2.5 years ago, and my husband was really interested in going into real estate. And I said, okay, I'm ready to get rid of that blind spot, and at least I'll go and listen to a program. And and the program he was looking at is called Fortune Builders, and they do a lot of single family stuff. And so I went there, and what really stood out to me is when a lot of the people stood up, because they always have their success stories come up on stage and tell you about what they did. And it's like one of the common things I saw was a lot of people went to Tony Robbins. And I also have always had this thing where I said, I don't do hero worship. So if everybody's into somebody, I'm going to go the opposite direction. It's kind of the inner rebel in me. And so I thought, okay, if everybody's going there, I'm going to take it under advisement, but I'm not interested. So about a year later is when I was introduced to multifamily. And I decided to, and again, this is start of my being brave story, is I decided last year that I would join an accountability group of women. And I've always been primarily worked around men all my life. So a lot of women talk about their issues with men in the industry. Women talk about that. And my issues was more with women because I knew how to handle men, but dealing with women was a pretty scary proposition for me. So I said, okay, I'm going to be brave. I need to go join this group. And so once again, everybody was saying, I've done Tony Robbins. I've done, Tony Robbins. And I thought, okay, I'm going to check this dude out. So I signed up for his first free program, and it was one of those, you bring your friends into it, kind of a Tupperware party type thing. And so I brought them in, and it just a lot of stuff was resonating, and he was asking kind of a lot of questions about getting under the hood. And so I thought, what I'm going to do is unleash the power within. And so I did that, and I just was ready. The time was right. Everything was happening. I was ready and to listen. And I said, I don't care what I uncover. I'm ready to just go for it. And so I did, both his Date with Destiny and Unleash the Power Within. And it really helped me. And that's really where I came into understanding of my purpose statement. And a lot of that, is, Energized by Joy is the name of my ministry. And, that's one of the things is I feel that I'm called to, help women and bring them to freedom and bring joy into their lives. And I was able to get into that during his programming. And then I did that through November. And the other name that kept cropping up was John Maxwell. And in the traditional financial world, they don't do personal self-development. So all these names were new to me. It all came through my real estate channels. And so everyone talked about John Maxwell. So I said, okay, let me check him out. And then as I started reading his stuff, I really, it really resonated with me. And I've always done a lot of speaking. I'm very comfortable speaking in front of people and have no problem talking to other people, but I really wanted to hone it in a more professional way. And so I joined that program, and I actually did it specifically just for the speaking, not the coaching aspect of it. But one of the things I realized that so much of what makes you a good speaker is using coaching skills and your listening skills and getting a pulse on the audience and what they need, and not always being a teller and being a listener and responder. And the other thing I really liked about the John Maxwell program is, again, it's not a faith-based organization, but it's certainly an organization that's very comfortable about talking about their faith. And so for me, that was a more comfortable place for me to explore my personal development, is a place where I could talk about my faith more openly.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. What is the basic premise behind John Maxwell's programs? Because we really haven't, I've read some of his books and seen some of his material, but we haven't talked about it very much on the podcast.
Yeah, no. So his big tenets are that he really wants to grow leaders, and so his model is doing masterminds, bringing people together, and they use his books. Now, he's the most prolific leadership author out there. I think he's written something like 70 books. I mean, that's not the right number, but it's some absurd number of books. And he just cranks them out. He's like, I spend a weekend and I crank out a book, and they're all very rich and they're all very good, but he has a way of making people vulnerable. And he's a pastor. So that's his background. He got into the coaching business by being a pastor, and it just was kind of a natural evolution into that. So he's really able to bring those skills into his leadership program. And he's very, very community oriented. But the big thing, and that I really like about him, is he's really you have to take accountability for your growth. His first really big book was called The Law of Intentionality, the 15 Laws of Intentionality. And it is, until you decide you want to change, you're never going to change. And really encouraging to take ownership of, I need to make this decision. People can't do it for me, because there's so many self-help programs. It's, people will arrive to it, and you think you're going to show up and you're going to magically be reformed. And then after you get over the rah of the weekend and the adrenaline, you get the adrenaline crash. It's like, wait a minute, not only have I not changed, but now I feel like a bigger loser, because I realize I have no power to change. I can't do anything about it. And I'm frustrated that I can't carry out what I learned. And you almost walk out, feeling worse about yourself. And so, so that's why the coaching and the mastermind programs are really important, because like anything, having, they call it discipleship, in the ministry, but, without having a coach or having a friend or having a trusted advisor keeping you accountable, it's really, really hard to stay on top of your goals and call you out when your blind spots are coming back up, because we all have them. Doesn't matter how reformed you are, your blind spots creep in, especially under stress.
And that is so true. I just got back from my mastermind group, and one of the things we do is called a duct tape session, which is basically you have to sit there and everyone will tell you you're good and you're bad. And you're not allowed to respond. You're not allowed to defend yourself. You just have to accept it and take it and then decide whether you want to go fix it afterwards. But the cool thing is people having the courage to call you out and tell you the elephants in the room, because that doesn't happen enough, or it happens in a very non-productive way.
And quite honestly, to me, that is 10 times harder than hearing it. I mean, that has always been the hardest. You know, I'm very good at internal commentary on what people need to hear, but it is hard to tell people that I love you enough to tell you this ain't working for you, sir.
And it's true. And we need to be called out. And, you know, a lot of times we follow dreams because somebody told us to do something, not because we wanted to. Or you'll go and you'll ask for advice and the people won't tell you the truth. And you spend years chasing something you think you're good at or is a good idea simply because the people wouldn't tell you the truth up front.
Kind of like you go in, I just got this image of like the American Idol auditions, right? When people are like, did their parents actually tell them they're a good singer? You know, it's like, did anybody ever tell them the truth? And now they're out here humiliated. And isn't that a great metaphor for what happens in life? That, you know, especially as adults, you know, it's you have permission, you know, for your children to guide them, but in adulthood, it's like you graduate from high school or college, and then what next? Who's there to keep you accountable? And do you want to receive it?
Yeah, there's usually nobody. Well, not only is there no one to keep you accountable, there's no one to tell you what to do.
Yeah. And then the number of times and of course, so, you know, you go to these personal development and you look under the hood and you're like, oh, I did this and I did that and da, 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 da. And you tell your friends, it's like, why didn't you say anything? It's like as plain as day in retrospect that I was just being an idiot. I'm like, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm like, well, hurt my feelings the next time. We think we're doing people a service by coddling them. And good friends, people we love, we need to love them enough to say, I love you enough to say, look, you know, this isn't working for you. And you keep telling me, you know, because it's like, why do I keep repeating these mistakes? Why do I keep going down the same road? And even though it's obvious as the day is long that you're going down the wrong path, we can't see. I mean, it's the most obvious things we miss on ourselves, right? You know, we can call out these complex things, but it's so often, you know, coming full circle with the finances, it's like, it's the most obvious things in your face, but yet you can't see it.
So true. And I think that's more of it's partially an American thing. It's probably some other culture. Some cultures are very good at calling people out. And so
I don't think people in the Eastern Bloc have a problem with that.
No. They're direct. And I mean,
I appreciate that. I love that. You know, I love the Germans. They won't hold back. They'll say it as it is. And there's no sugarcoating. Sometimes it doesn't feel good, but you're so much better on the other side after you lick your wounds. There's no sugarcoating in that culture.
And there's a lot of other cultures that are very similar to that. Somehow we took a wrong turn here, and we need to go back and work on.
Because coddling isn't working. I mean, and for goodness sakes, I mean, you know, look what's going on with our national finances right now. It's like, when are the grown-ups going to show up?
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. It is not a pretty situation, and I do not know what that future looks like and how it will end up. So you got to keep on your toes. Otherwise, you may end up on the wrong side of that, too.
Well, you know, and exactly that's, you know, and back to the financial literacy. That's why, well, do I have the power to control the government and the nuttiness going on there? No, but I do have the power to control the people in my life or the clients that come into my life and to say, let's control what we can control.
And that's true. And part of that is staying out of debt and building wealth. And then you have the ability to weather storms. If you're on the edge and a storm comes, you don't have it's going to be a difficult time.
And that emergency savings, that's a foreign notion. That is not an American idea, is it?
No. So do you still see that? You see that with your high net worth client? I shouldn't say high net worth because that's not the right word. High income clients.
Yes, that's an accurate way to say it. They're the worst. They are the worst, I tell you. Like I said, what I find is there's an inverse relationship with it because when you have a lot of money, it's easy to get sloppy, but then things catch up with you. The clients that don't have a lot of money, they know where their money is. I mean, when it's like the people, and I'm speaking a lot of times of people that came from little means and they want to make a difference. They want to, make a difference for their family and do something different. They're the best clients because they're saying, I wasn't taught these tools and I want to learn these tools and I want to implement them in my life. But since I was never taught, I don't know where to begin. And so, but it's, if you're making little income, you have to really pay attention to where your money is and where it's going. And, every dollar does matter. And then if you got lots of dollars, that's where, you were saying earlier how the compounding effect really catches up with you. The more money you make, the greater that compounding impact is by definition. And so the high income, having an emergency, the emergency savings account is called the credit card.
Correct. And it works to a certain extent at a certain time, but other times it may not work, especially if you've got to go through a longer period of a downturn. It's fine on a short.
And the other thing is, and especially if you're expecting a lot of your investments to be it's like, well, I'll just cash out some investments. Well, when your times get tough, and it tends to be your investments probably have gone down too at the time that you are thinking of pulling it out in crisis. And then, of course, you've got we've seen this in this whole COVID world, but, I've been through multiple, I was through the .bomb bubble and, and also the 2008 crash. And I've seen several of these cycles, and the people least prepared want to pull out when the least amount of money is in there. And it has the largest negative impact on their portfolios.
That it does. And each of these bubbles have their own flavor and their own way of working out. It's unfortunately, though, the way we've been doing it, every bubble creates an even bigger bubble behind it.
Right. And it just looks slightly different enough where it doesn't look like the same bubble, but under the hood, it's the same bubble. Just dress it up in a different coat and we're going to be good until it gets revealed as it approaches crisis, right?
Part of that, though, is I think for most people, if you think about it, what you're talking about is 25 years of history.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in my mid-50s. I was investing going into that first bubble. A lot of people my age may or may not have been. They might have been so early in their journey, it may not have even made a difference to them and what they saw. So you literally have to go through a couple of these before you get a clue of what's going on around you, because until you've lost a considerable amount of money in a downturn, you don't know what it feels like.
Yeah, it's true. And then it forever leaves an impression on you.
Correct. And that comes back to mindset. Even though I've been through these bubbles, it doesn't prevent me from investing. It's just, hey, okay, this is how it went. This is how we're going to pivot. And this is how we're going to come back. And you have to be able to do that.
Well, I mean, and it depends on, and that the mindset is, how do you respond in crisis generally? And how have you responded that? Because I know I mean, I can't tell you the number of clients who would not take their money out of cash because they were so petrified to put their money back in the market. And you said, especially literally when we were having negative interest rates there for a little while, like you were literally losing money by not doing anything with your money.
Which is very true. Today, it's with everything in an asset bubble, it's difficult to steer through and see how it all comes out. Eventually, we'll figure it out. And then we'll be like, oh, that was so obvious. Why didn't we see that?
Nothing like that hindsight 2020 thing, right?
Exactly. So you mentioned the book, Aspire Women Finding Their Purpose. Let's dig into that a little bit more. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a compilation book, and I'm in there with 19 other authors. And it's about women finding their purpose, but it really, the biggest focus is how you leverage trauma without becoming bitter and turning it into it, often leveraging it into your purpose. You know, it's often, you often see people are touched with some sort of trauma and it becomes their mission. You know, it happens a lot of times. People pass away with cancer, or there's been a drug addiction, problems with drugs in your family, and then all of a sudden you feel drawn to helping other people in that same kind of situation. So it's really finding victory in the trials of life. You know, my chapter is actually called Energized by Joy, which is how I named my ministry, actually, was when I named that chapter. Because, you know, in that book, we each all have a chapter, but I share vignettes. And one of the things I did, because I have Lyme disease, and in 2014, I was in a really bad car accident, and I was on bed rest for 12 weeks. And then shortly after that, is when the Lyme was activated. They think it was in my system latent for a really long time, but the trauma of the accident activated it. And then, moving from there, and then I was diagnosed with third stage colon cancer. And so I had a series of things that happened. And during that time, and I've always been like I said, I think I said earlier in the show that I always wanted to be a writer. And, for lots of reasons, I ended up not writing for many years. And I used that time to start writing again. And that's also the same time I really stepped deep into my faith again. I mean, my faith is really what carried me through that time. But what I did to survive it was I would read a book in the Bible, or a chapter out of a book. And in my case, it was Psalms. So I actually wrote my biography from reading the Psalms. So what I do every day, I'd read a Psalm, and then I would relate it, whether it was one verse or the whole chapter, even the notes about it. I would start writing my experience with it. And so I've actually done that to all 150 Psalms. And I originally was going to publish the whole thing, but it was deeply, deeply personal. And in sharing my life story, you always have to be careful, not telling stories that aren't yours to share, when you talk about people who hurt you and that kind of thing. So I really kind of stepped back and decided not to put the book out, that Psalms book. It was more part of my healing journey. And so when this opportunity came my way, it was actually, quite honestly, it was my personal coach who was coaching the publisher. And she said, "You've got to meet this woman." So that's how it came into my path. And so what I did is I pulled out 8, I call them vignettes, but there are 8 of those 150 Psalms that really kind of encapsulated my story and how I came into what I'm doing now, and how I use those personal traumas to what I call myself now is I'm a blessing finder. What I really try to do is look at every situation and try to find out, okay, what can we learn from this? How can we grow from this, rather than hate the trials of our life and begrudge them and get caught in our head, rather than saying, why, what an idiot I was for doing that. Why did I do that? Give yourself some grace and say, okay, what did I learn from that? Would I do it again? Probably not. But what can I learn from it? And how can I grow from that? Because that's a lesson I can take into the next steps of my life. And, so that again, once again, relates very closely to the financial, doing the financial coaching is, let's look at each of these steps and what can we learn from them, and what can we recalibrate going forward. And so that's what I did, is I started to look at my life and say, okay, rather than being angry at these traumas in my past, how can I recalibrate them to make me stronger and grow from them? And, my chapter on Lyme disease, I actually call it Why I'm Grateful for My Lyme Disease, because it taught me how to live in the present. And, because it's, with Lyme disease, you can wake up and you're out for a week, and sometimes your brain is scrambled eggs and you can't think straight. And then weeks and weeks will go by where nothing is wrong, and then you'll lose a day, so it taught me where every day I can wake up and say, okay, Lord, what do you have for me today? What can I get? What can I do? And how can I make the world a better place today with my little piece of the pie?
And, having that gratitude and being able to accept whatever you're given and find the good in it is a gift. And the reality is everyone's facing struggles. Everyone's got a lot buried underneath the hood that is hidden away that most people don't ever know or see. And when you start to find out what's going on in reality in people's lives, then you understand my life isn't so bad after all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you get into trauma and you get so stuck in your world, and everything you see is negative. And why is this happening to me? And, because, people get into this whole thing. Did God do it to me, or Satan do it, or whatever? And to me, it's like, to me, that's not even a conversation, because it doesn't even matter. It's like, what am I going to do with where I'm at? I don't care who caused it. It's how am I going to respond to it? Because if you camp out on who did this to me, whether, my mom wronged me, my dad wronged me, or my friend wronged me, or the where our lives are full of people wronging us, and that's a place of unforgiveness and ingratitude. And that has a negative impact. That isn't where you grow. That isn't where you find life. That isn't life-giving.
So true. And it's not easy to do. And I think that, but, it comes back to vulnerability, which I know I've heard you talk about a lot in the past. And a lot of people struggle with it because they think if they're vulnerable, that they're going to be looked down on and that it's not good. And the reality is it's more so the opposite.
And pride goeth before the fall, right? I mean, it's a very, just a few words that are very powerful and so true. And like you said, the opposite is true, because humans are wired to love redemption stories. We love them. And in fact, the greater the redemption, the more we're enthralled by it, right?
It is true. That's what it always comes down to. We were just talking about that this weekend. That is the story arc. Somebody has something, life is perfect, and then you see the bigger the dip, the more compelling the story.
I mean, nobody's going to watch a movie of everybody's life being hunky-dory and making all the right decisions. That's not very interesting.
No, it's kind of boring. So right now you're spending your time in a whole nother area, which is real estate and multifamily real estate, correct? Yeah. I'm splitting my time between that and the financial coaching. So what brought you to multifamily real estate?
Well, it's actually funny because I was in a Bible study with the guy, and he knew what I was doing in the single family side of it. And the single family, like I said, I'd done some flipping and stuff, but it wasn't connecting with me. It's like, this is good. I get it, but it's certainly not my purpose. I don't feel connected with it. And he said, you know what, given your background with the traditional investments and just with the finance, investor relations and all that kind of stuff, he's like, your skill set is perfect for multifamily. And so now that you've done all this training on, real estate in general through the single family program you're in, it won't be a huge leap for you. And it's not. So, that's obviously, it's been very interesting because, I've been on a fair amount of other podcasts, and I've written a report. And in fact, the name of my multifamily business is called East Light Investments, eastlightinvest.com. And on there's actually a report, and it's the 10 reasons why I left the traditional investment business and for multifamily. And in that, I talk about a lot of the differences between it. And I was really, and more specifically in the investment world, I was a fixed income. Fixed income was my domain. So it's even more, to talk about, just perfectly gift wrap for the mentality and understanding, interest rates and understanding, amortization and all the things that go along in the fixed income world. It was just a natural place for me to be. And dealing with the money management and dealing with investors and just how investors think and how to talk to them. It wasn't much of a educational leap for me. It was just more learning about the industry itself and who makes it, who runs it. And as you know, it's a fairly small world. So I very quickly kind of learned, who's who. And you kind of learn who the usual suspects are. And so fortunately, and actually for me, you had actually asked me a question in our pre-interview about the impact of being a woman in the industry. And for me, it's actually not been that big of deal, but I think one of the reasons it hasn't been is because I'm a chartered financial analyst, a CFA. So because of those credentials, I get a lot of respect in the industry because they knew what it took to get that credential. And so a lot of people who are otherwise might not talk to other women coming in who don't have that kind of background. I think that's probably one of the reasons I have seen some sexism in the industry, but not experienced it myself personally at all. And I think that's maybe why for me, it's been a little bit of a different experience.
And what you said to me before is what you accept is what you get. You said you won't accept.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to deal with it.
I don't make it a deal. I don't make it a big deal. And so, we're talking shop. We talk shop. I don't care if you're pink, purple, or blue. We're talking shop. It doesn't matter to me. You're man, woman, Martian. I don't care. If we're talking that, we're talking shop. And so when you don't bring a level of tension or attitude into it, in fact, I've been working with my sisters in the multifamily to say the bigger deal you make about it, the bigger deal it becomes. If that becomes your identity, you're making it a big deal. And so at the end of the day, money talks and your abilities talk. So if you're actually able to, if you got a good deal, it doesn't matter. I haven't seen the guy say, no, I'm not going to take your deal because you're a woman. If you got a good deal, they don't care if you're pink, purple, or blue. If they see a good deal, they want to be part of the deal. Now, where some of the sexism can come in is how they treat you do they treat you as a co-participant, and what's that mix? But you also can control that and say, wait a minute, if I'm going to be on this deal, this is the level of the deal that I want to be in. And you have to come into it with a level of confidence. So if you come into it with confidence, you don't get trampled on because if you're bringing value and confidence, the rest of it kind of becomes a moot point.
That is so true. I always say the only color that matters is green, and they're looking at cash flow.
And I have to say, in the multifamily, it is a very male-centric world. But, I cut my teeth in investments following the chemical industry in the early 90s. And there I was, a 23-year-old whippersnapper with a bunch of very old gentlemen. But I came in and did my thing. And I wrote good reports and I found good companies. So it was a non-issue for me. And I tended not to gravitate to highlighting that, because if you're going to highlight that difference, you can't get angry that difference gets exploited, right? Because you're there's a level of, okay, I accept bringing this argument to the table. And so I tend not to just even go there. It's not an issue. It's like I have enough confidence that I know what I'm doing. And if you don't like it, it's not because of, it's not because I'm a woman. It's because you didn't like my idea. And sometimes if I bring a crappy idea, I'm not going to get the level of respect for bringing a good deal. And that's on me.
And it comes back to what we've been talking about the whole time, which is mindset. So we always like to get people to move forward. What's an action step people can take this week to move forward?
This is actually great. And I don't know if this is an action step you've asked for, but our conversation prompted this. And that is, go look at your last credit card statement and have a mind out of body experience and say, what does this tell me about myself? And if I don't like what it's showing me, take the brave step to talk to somebody about it, and it's somebody you trust, because you got to talk to somebody you can receive from, and somebody who's going to be willing to speak into your life as well. And that's often why people end up with coaches, because your good friends don't want to hurt your feelings and won't be bold, but the coaches are there to tell you the truth. But if it tells you a story that you don't like, take some action and say, I don't accept this. I don't accept this about myself. I want to move forward and move into what I'm called to do. And I don't need this heaviness on me anymore. And I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to take that step.
And that's a perfect thing to do. Look at what your money is telling you about the way you behave and what you're showing up and how you're showing up in life.
And do you even know and are you somebody who monitors your credit every day, or do you wait until you get the late payment notice?
By then it's too late.
Right, exactly. And make the decision to say, today, I choose not to wait for those late payment statements. I'm going to be brave and see what's under there. And as soon as you open that, you will be able to open up all sorts of other parts of yourself once you do that, because that's a beautiful starting point.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Gratitude, living in gratitude.
And that seems to come up a lot. If you're not grateful for what you have, you won't be having fun in life.
Well, and abundance doesn't come your way. If people like to give and receive, and so into somebody who has a grateful heart, that you want to be being around. You can't help but find joy being around grateful people.
So true. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That it's okay to say, I made a mistake, to say I was wrong.
They don't teach that one in school, right? And parents don't teach that one either.
In fact, they teach the opposite.
They teach the opposite. And we get what we teach. And so sometimes I think we need to really think about, what is it that we want to learn?
And we have a society full of people who can't say they made a mistake, and until it gets so big that it takes so much energy to unwind.
That it does. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Be careful who you surround yourself with. And that advice is because if you surround yourself around people with unhealthy habits and unhealthy things that they do and say and behave, there's an osmosis that takes place and you become okay with that. So surround yourself by people who inspire you. I guess that'd be the positive take on it. Surround yourself by people who inspire you.
And most 18-year-olds are surrounded by people of the opposite, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's always refreshing when you see somebody who's got it together and is building a great life at 18. If people would like to find you and learn more about your work, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes, they can reach me. The name of my financial coaching company is called Financial Literacy for Her, and that is finliteracyforher.com. And you can always reach me by telephone, 864-551-1802.
And we will put those in the show notes as well and have them for
And I am in all this, and Fin Literacy for Her is on all the social media.
Makes it easy.
So it's very easy to find me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a blast.
Thank you.
What are you doing with your traumas? Remember, the worse it is, the bigger your story. How do you view it? Is it a positive or a negative in your life? Are you learning and growing from them? Mine have helped me to become who I am. Do you know what your money mindsets are? We ask every guest about theirs. Have you asked about yours? This week's action step was to go look at your credit card statement and ask, what does it say about me? It's going to help you answer that question. What are you doing to develop yourself and improve yourself? Remember, we talked about compounding, and this applies to every single area of your life. Define what you want, create the confidence, and go achieve it. It's possible. Next week, I have on Gil Baumgartner to chat about his book, Foolish: How Investors Get Worked Up and Worked Over by the System. He's got some great insights to share from the industry. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.